Back, guys. McMullen and McDonald here on Birds 365. We are joined by one of our regulars. Had done a great job with us Wednesday all year. Some scheduling conflict, so we asked Mike Gill to join us on a football Friday. He said, "Done deal. I'll come on with you guys." Gill, what do you do on Fridays? Most Fridays.
Same thing I do on Wednesdays. Except for Friday, I have lunch with my father as opposed to Wednesday where I have to feed myself.
Oh, there we go. That's so a little bit of a change. So the day on Friday since you're having lunch with because you and I struggle with days of the week, man. We don't know what day.
Well, no, he'll text me and just say, it's the same text every week. I don't want to be a bother, but just making sure we're still on for lunch, and I'll respond 12:20, same place. I got to tell him we eat at the same place at the same time every Friday, but I still got to say 12:20 at this place. See you there.
Consistency is a good thing, and we're hoping for that with the Eagles. However, you could say the same thing about the Kansas City Chiefs. Both of these teams, exact same record, exact same number of points scored over the entire season. There are differences, but there are similarities. And we know the Eagles are 1.5 to a 2-point favorite going into the game. Why do you think that's the case, Mike?
Well, and they both have 6 all-pro players as well. So their similarities are everywhere. But to me, this goes back to what I thought about the 49er game. I think I told you guys I didn't think that game would be close. I know the quarterback situation murkied the waters. I don't know that made a big difference. I don't think Brock Purdy was putting 30 points on the board. I think Philadelphia was going to probably dominate that game. I think Philadelphia is just better. I just think they're a better roster. Kansas City has Mahomes, and that's why the line might be closer. If Mahomes isn't playing quarterback for this team, this line should be Philadelphia should probably be a 5 to 6 point favorite in this game. Their roster, it is hard for us sometimes in Philadelphia to come to terms that we have nice things. We like being the underdog. This team is just flat out better than everybody they played. It's not, they haven't played anybody. The path was too easy. No, they're better than everybody. Yeah. If you're one of those people that looks at this Eagles team and says they didn't play anybody, the path was so easy, tell me what about this team doesn't impress you? Where do you look at this team and say, well, they're not very good there? You can't find one spot. I can find spots in Kansas City that you might say, they got some issues in that spot. I think Philly's one spot would be the middle of the field against Kelsey. Kansas City's spot is a lot of places. If San Francisco had trouble stopping run, they got their ass kicked up front. Now, Chris Jones is probably better on the interior than anybody they have. But if they couldn't stop the run, and they have the 2 best linebackers in the league to help them, how's this going to go?
Yeah, fair point. The Chiefs have a good pair of linebackers as well. Not quite as good as San Francisco, as you mentioned. Chris Jones might be the second best player in the Super Bowl. I look at it like the Chiefs are top heavy and the Eagles are far more well-rounded. The top of the Chiefs roster, which is basically Mahomes, Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, that's phenomenal. Those 3 players at those 3 positions. But then, the Eagles, it's everywhere, as you mentioned. And you talked about the middle of the field, Mike. Well, yeah, everybody's got a problem with Travis Kelce. Everybody. Yeah. But the Eagles have C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They have Avonte Maddox is back. They have T.J. Edwards, Kaiser White, Marcus Epps. They just peck away at you. It's like a baseball team with a great lineup from 1 through 9, and there's nowhere for the pitcher to relax because everybody can hurt you up and down that lineup. And, Miles Sanders was the one who said this is an all-star team, and we all laughed at him at the time. They were really, really stinking close with 22 guys. 17 of them had some kind of 18 of them had some kind of postseason honors. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, John, I look at this team a lot, and it's like, why are we not coming to terms with how good this team is? Why are people holding back? Why do they not want to say what we're all seeing here? And I guess it goes back to our many people's predetermined thought of the quarterback, right?
Yeah.
As you just said, they have the best offensive line in football, and quite frankly, it might be one of the best offensive line. Like back in the 80s, they would have had a nickname. They'd be the Hogs or something. This offensive line is that dominant. The Washington Redskins back then won Super Bowls because they had the best offensive line. I mean, I heard Doug Williams on the radio yesterday. Doug was a great quarterback, but they weren't winning the game because Doug Williams was some magical passer of the football. They had Timmy.
And they won with, by the way, they won with 3 different quarterbacks.
Right. Timmy Smith has the record for most yards in a Super Bowl game. He's the only running back in NFL history to go over 200 yards in the Super Bowl and not be in the Hall of Fame. Why? They have the best offensive line in football, and the Eagles right now have what Washington dominated with in the 80s. We're watching a team. That's the issue. We're watching a team that has turned the clock back in philosophy with an offense that looks new. This RPO wasn't used back then, but what they're doing is what teams back then did. They just shoved it down your throat, and then if they have to, because they shoved it down your throat so much, they'll throw it down the field, and they happen to have 2 guys that are excellent to be able to go down the field. I mean, Devonta Smith, I know he didn't catch that ball, but to be even make it a conversation, to fool the referee, to think he caught the ball was a play in itself. A.J. Brown all year long, he has been the best at going down the field. He has 6 touchdowns of over 20 yards. There are just so many different ways they can get you. And I think it comes back to many people's predetermination of Jalen Hurts was, well, he's not good enough. Well, now he's showing he is good enough, but nobody wants to believe it. It's much like last year to me, guys, where nobody wanted to believe in the Bengals. Like, you have to do something to prove that I should believe in you. And the Bengals went to the Super Bowl. And now this year, people believed in the Bengals. They got the benefit of the doubt because of what they did a year ago. And that's kind of where Philadelphia is now. They are, hey, I can't believe in you because you haven't done this before, and I didn't think you were able to do it. You need to do it and then do it again next year.
All right, they're going to not play anybody and win the Super Bowl somehow. But,
Let me play some devil's advocate for you there, Mike, because if you're right about the Philadelphia fans still having questions on Jalen Hurts, when he went 13-1, shame on them if they we still don't know because he hasn't won a playoff game. 13-1 isn't enough of an example. Come on. But here's where I think a question could be legit. He really hasn't done anything since he's come back. He bangs up the shoulder. He sits for 2 games, even if you want to give him a pass for the Giant regular season game because they called the game very conservatively. They didn't need to take chance. They didn't need to have him throw the ball. They didn't need to put him at risk. I can give him a pass on that game. That's fine. He hasn't thrown for 160 yards yet. And again, it all comes down to, well, they didn't need him to, or he wasn't capable of, because he had some open guys downfield. He didn't throw the greatest passes. You think he's 100% coming into this game?
No, I think it's a great point, Jody, is that he did not play well last week. They didn't need him to, but he didn't. And this goes back to, he took shots down the field. He was a little off. And if that's the case in this game, are they going to need him to make more of an impact than he has? We talked about on my show yesterday, Jerry Jones made this comment that seems to be a bit outlandish, but that the Eagles better win this year because they're going to be like the Rams. It's just going to fall apart. And my point was, wait a second. The Eagles essentially have the Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying he's better than Mahomes. I'm just saying they have the best quarterback in the conference. Kansas City's roster has slowly deteriorated, but they're back here for the 5th time, not in the Super Bowl, but in the championship round because they have the best quarterback. Are the Eagles in a run where they are about to be that Chiefs-like team because they have the best quarterback? Well, this game, I think, might show us a lot more of if they need to have Jalen Hurts be a big part of it, because the roster is going to start deteriorating. Are they going to have to start leaning on him more? So this particular season, it might not matter as much, but going forward, if they want to keep this run going, with Jalen Hurts, it's probably going to have to be more because of him. So, Jody, I don't think this game is going to have to be more because of him, but moving down the road, it might have to be. And we don't know that he can carry the team all by himself. He hasn't had to. Now, the offense in the future shouldn't take much of a step back. Their problems are going to be more on defense. I mean, this offensive line should be back except for, say, Amala. I would imagine they can't bring him back. But everybody else is Sanders, too. I don't think Sanders has a probably 50-50, but the rest of the offense. So his offense should stay intact, except for maybe Steichen, who has another interview with the Colts this week.
Colts are coming in town. You never know with Jim Irsay. He's trying to convince everybody to hire Jeff Saturday back. So
right. So Jody, they might not need him in this game to show, and that'll be the interesting offseason. Well, he didn't play well in the playoffs. He can't win a thing for a chip for the team, and that will be something he'll have to prove people wrong. It'll just be another thing for him to have to prove people wrong again, and that's been his entire career.
Yeah, and that's where I think Jerry Jones was wrong with that sort of comp, because, the Rams had Matthew Stafford, over leveraged, aging quarterback who made a ton of money. The Eagles have a 24-year-old quarterback on his rookie deal. And, Jerry fails to understand, and maybe this is the problem in Dallas, he better get a better salary cap guy in there, because Howie Roseman will sign Jalen Hurts to an extension. And by the way, Joe Banner put the number, Mike, at 47 to 52 average annual value, not dollars, millions of dollars, 47 to 52 average annual value. But he's still got 1 year left on his rookie deal. So Howie did this to a lesser degree with A.J. Brown. He signed him to the big extension, but it doesn't kick in, really, from a salary cap standpoint, in a significant way to the third year of the contract. By then, who knows? He might be reworking the deal. Same thing will happen here with Jalen Hurts. So they still have that extra window. But you're right, to have a Kansas City run where you're making 5 consecutive championship games, 3 out of 4 Super Bowls now, or a New England run, it's got to be about the quarterback at some point. Because at some point, 47 to 52 is going to affect your ability to build the back end of the roster.
Well, that and the coach too. I mean, this was in New England, it was the Brady Belichick, and in Kansas City, I don't know how much longer Andy's going to coach. He's 64, 65 years old, but him and Mahomes together, they're going to be, if they stay together, they probably go 10 times together, right? They'll probably be in the AFC Championship game. I don't mean you're making a Super Bowl every year, but you're going to be in the championship game or round or conversation. When McNabb was here with Andy, you would get your old Sports Illustrated, and McNabb would be on the cover every year. The Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. It would be the prediction in August, because you had Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb, and that was better than everybody else in the conference for the most part. Is Nick Sirianni, who got a shot taken at him yesterday, and Jalen Hurts, that combination for the NFC. That will be very interesting to see moving forward, and a lot will have to do with how Howie navigates through this offseason. But you're right, John. I'm in a different room than I'm normally in, and I think this one's probably better, but I sat here with you guys in August, and you guys brought up about paying Hurts $20 million a year. And
it was 25, but yeah,
25, we thought that sounded preposterous based on the year that we saw. Now you're throwing 50 at us. 50. And we're kind of
and by the way, they better get it done before Burrow and Justin Herbert. Joe pointed that out. You better get it done, because it ain't going down. It's only going up.
Absolutely. And if he has a big game here, does it go up even more?
Well, that's a possibility. If he outplays Patrick Mahomes, well, then it's very fair to comp to the guy who's going to be quarterbacking the other team. All right, and the guy who's coaching the other team is Andy Reid. We all watched Andy coach and commented on Andy coaching and the fact that Andy Reid, not a CEO coach, I know my partner has an opinion on that, from time to time makes a technical error in the middle of the game. Is that how big a plus, if it's a plus at all, for the Eagles in this game, that Andy Reid will be doing what Andy Reid always does, excellent play calling, but timeout usage may be questionable, maybe makes a strategic decision that doesn't work out. Would you consider that an edge for the Eagles this week? Because they've got a very young Super Bowl wet behind the ears coach, but at least the CEO coach.
Yeah, it's funny. The Sirianni yesterday, Love took a shot at Sirianni, and I happen to have Ross Tucker on for my Believe in Eagles podcast, which is out right now, so you can check that out. And Ross, I asked him about Love's comments and what he thought, and he said Sirianni, it's not just Sirianni, by the way, it's the staff. And in the NFL, it's your staff. And Sirianni and his staff just absolutely out-coached Shanahan last week. He says, and I don't know what Love is watching. They out-coached Dayball as well. So the Andy Reid portion of this will be in a big game. If it's a close game, will Andy's deficiencies be an issue? He is one of the best coaches we've ever seen. I mean, I think he's top 5 in all-time wins. I mean, he's going to go down as one of the best coaches of all time. I have no but again, I go back to a rant I had with you guys last week. Why do we think coaches would be good at everything? He might be a great play caller and great designer and great schemer and great culture setter and great this. But why does that mean you're also great at managing the clock? And we know that that's something that Andy has had problems with. So if this game is close, Jody, yeah, you better be sure that the Eagles have a check mark on that side of the ball in managing the clock and using their timeouts. So if that comes into play, sure. Now, preparation, getting ready for this game in 2 weeks, we know Andy's one of the best. What are they, 28-4 off a bye or something? Nick Sirianni, by the way, 3-0 off of a bye. He's turning into a little Andy Reid himself on that. So, yeah, the coaching is going to have a big factor, and we all think that's easily Andy Reid, which I'm not saying it's not. But when it comes to a close game, that's where you have to see, is Andy going to hold up in a close game? And Nick Sirianni, while he has no big game close games, has shown in close games, we're not sitting on Birds 365 the next day after an Eagles game blaming Nick Sirianni for managing the clock and using timeouts wrong. That has not been something he has had issues with. So I think you would give a check mark in time management to Philadelphia. The rest of the stuff, Andy is more than capable.
Yeah. And Andy's changed over the years from when he was in Philadelphia. One of the most impressive things about Andy to me is, if you ask me who the most innovative coach in the NFL is, I'm going to go Andy Reid. He's 60. He's almost a senior citizen. And, supposedly the new age coaches, he's the one that morphs and changes. And he's given up play calling. He's sort of like in between. He's given up play calling to Doug, but people didn't know at times, and Matt Nagy and Eric Bieniemy, and but he'll take it back if it's not working. So he kind of toggles in between. And yeah, he's a first ballot Hall of Fame coach. But here's when I want to talk about Nick, who's a very good young coach. And you mentioned the Julian Love comments. Here's the concern. We just went through this with Doug Peterson. Once you set the standard, you and I talked about this on your show yesterday, Mike. This is the standard now. Then the expectations change. And like I said, Nick Sirianni might win 9 games or 10 games or 11 games 2 years from now. And he might be a better coach than he is right now. People aren't going to look at it that way. Are they?
No, of course not. I mean, this is especially the Philadelphia fans, which are fantastic. It's what makes a fan being great is watching the irrationality of every fan around you that you have shared this common bond with, which is, yeah, I mean, you might win 12 games with a lesser roster than you currently have, and people are expecting more because you gave them more before. So a 11-12 win team might be, wow, you did an amazing job with this team, but people wanted you to win 14 or 15 games, and therefore they start to question, and that happens when, and this happened to Andy, where teams start to pluck your coaches away. And that is all encompassing that Andy's a great head coach, but what made him also great is he had great assistants along the way. He's got one of the best trees possibly, in terms of, right? of all time. And you look at Belichick's coaches, when they get plucked, they fail constantly. Andy's coaches are all still in the league. And Andy's a guy that got hired in 1999, and his coaches are still all over this league. So eventually the staff starts to fall apart. How do you replenish those? And that was the problem with Doug. I think we talked about, maybe with you, John, was that 4-win team the Eagles had. Were they a 4-win roster? Well, if you remember, their offensive line just was decimated with injuries, coupled with the fact that Wentz just completely fell apart. So you had 5 different offensive linemen. You had a new guy in there every week, and then Wentz was horrendous. But Doug wanted to keep his staff intact, and they wanted him to make changes, and he wasn't willing to do that, so they had an impasse, and they decided to move on, which, in hindsight, who knows? I mean, it's probably best for both of these guys. Are the Eagles in this situation if Press Taylor is still coaching here and some of the guys that they wanted to keep here? So that is where it's going to be interesting for Nick. How much does he rely on these particular assistants? And when they eventually get plucked, how does he delegate play calling? Does the new coordinator come in and get to call plays? Nick says, I don't need to call plays. I like game planning. I like the preparation of the game week. So he doesn't want to be a caller. And if he is a play caller, is he even good at it? And is the next guy they hire a good play caller? Shane Steichen's a big factor in this. And then John Gannon, if he goes, who takes over the defense and how that all incorporates. So that will be the interesting next phase for Nick Sirianni. I think Julian Love needs to figure out on his own staff who's doing the stuff there that got that team to 9 wins, because you better be shaking that guy's hand instead of taking a backhanded swipe at him.
Well, I don't think he's going to be giving credit to anybody, because it's a players' league, as per Julian Love, and that's why Nick Sirianni shouldn't be.
This isn't the NBA, Jody. This isn't the NBA where you have one. Now, Patrick Mahomes can elevate you, but most 53-man rosters in this league are pretty much on the same plane. There might be a guy here that takes you there, but most of these teams are kind of in the middle. And then preparation, game plan, execution comes in on game day, and that separates the teams that win. There's not a whole heck of a lot of difference between team 28 and team 14 that made the playoffs.
Coaching much more important in the NFL. I think we all agree on that. All right. I want you both to answer this question. I need John's response here as well. But Mike, you first. About one of the guys you were just talking about, key member of the Eagles staff, Jonathan Gannon. It looks like he's not going to be getting a head coaching position. Shane Steichen's still in the mix for the Colt one. Gets his second interview on Saturday. You need a prediction. I don't think he's going to get that job, but at least he's still in the conversation, which Jonathan Gannon isn't. So despite the phenomenal year that the Eagle defense had, it wasn't enough to get Jonathan Gannon a head coaching position. Well, he's got one more game to show his stuff this year, the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. And he's done it the way he's done it all year long, and had, at least in the eyes of some, me, John, Mike, I'll let you chime in and give your Jonathan Gannon estimation as well. And it didn't get him the gig. Should there be any worry that Gannon tries a little too hard in this upcoming game? That he decides, maybe I need to tinker. Maybe I need to show something else if my eventual goal is to get a head coaching job. Should we be worried about that at all for this game against the Chiefs?
I wouldn't think so. No. I think Gannon, look, he was interviewed by a team that he had some ties with, Houston, twice last year and this year. He had a couple extra nibbles last year that he didn't get this year. If he wants to be a head coach, I don't know that all of a sudden he just starts pulling out 50% blitzing and all these different stunts and looks in this game. I know it's his biggest resume piece that he'll ever have, but I think John Gannon, it's interesting, and I don't have any problem with John Gannon. I didn't have any criticisms of him. Last year, they just didn't have the talent. I mean, I didn't like the scheme with the talent that they have, and that's one of those things. Do you scheme differently, do something that you don't want to do based on your talent, or do you just run your scheme and wait till you get the players for that? I think he kind of could have tinkered some things last year, although they were better in the second half of the year. They did get better with that team. And, did Gannon endear himself to the fans? You guys, have you seen this video of him just basically?
Yeah, he finally did. I said he upped his pandering game. Now he's won everybody over.
He's won everybody over, man. Yeah. We're going to bleep and gut this team. And then the place goes nuts. And then, but Gannon, this will be a very interesting game for him. But look, it's almost the same as Jim Schwartz. People didn't like Schwartz towards the end. He was this, that, the sticks defense. The defense won in 2017, the Falcon game. Nick Foles was terrible in that game. Then they dominated the Vikings in that second game. They got the big turnover that turned that whole game around. The defense had dominated for 2 playoff games to get them to the Super Bowl. And then in the Super Bowl, the game just like the style of that game got away from them, and they did not play all that well. But they made the biggest play when they needed the biggest play when it mattered the most by doing what Jim Schwartz said. We're not going to blitz. We're going to get pressure with our 4, and they did. This, to me, feels very much similar, where the defense just dominated the 2 games they played, and this could be a Super Bowl game where the style of this game is a little bit more up and down, and people are going to be complaining. I said it yesterday. All the John Gannon haters are going to say, I knew it was going to be Gannon's fault. He was going to be the reason they lost this particular game. So no, I don't think he's trying to do anything different in this game, Jody, to try to impress anybody. I think he's going to do what he normally does. He's going to have his hands full with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, but that won't I'll tell you what, if he tries to do something crazy outside the box that he doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't do something different for this particular offense, because like I said with the Eagles, when you play the Eagles, you're seeing something you've never seen. You're about to get your butt whipped up front, and you can't prepare for that during the course of the 17-game season. This goes back to the 49ers are the number 1 rush defense. They're number 1. They got that ranking by not playing Philadelphia. You ain't going to be number 1 if you play that team. And the Eagles are about to face something that they haven't seen all year. No quarterback that they have seen this year is on the level of this guy. And they probably have the best weapon the Eagles have had to deal with all year, Travis Kelce. So John Gannon better find something a little different if he wants to keep those guys in check.
And Mike, good point with Jim Schwartz, and he has not forgotten that everyone has forgotten how well that defense played against Atlanta and Minnesota, but then they gave up 500 yards passing, and it's all about, they won the Super Bowl, and some people still complained. And that's when Jim said, well, he said it many times, games have personalities, man. Games have personalities. And sometimes you're in a shootout and you make the big play like Brandon Graham did. And sometimes you're able to dominate. But same thing has happened this time around, as you mentioned. Completely dominant. He gutted those Eppers. So now he's as popular as he's ever been. But if Patrick Mahomes goes for 380, 4 touchdowns, and the Eagles still win the game, by the way, because it's a shootout, and they still win the game, he's going to be public enemy number 1 again.
Well, during the course of the game, yes, social media will be lighting him up the whole time. I knew this Gannon was the problem. I told you Gannon was a problem as they come back to win the game. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a game very similar to that game where it's just back and forth. The 2 teams are scoring. Mahomes is excellent. And, this goes back to Jody's point. Hurts is going to have to try to keep up with them. But I don't know. See, and that's one style. Like last week I said, I think the the 49er game was either going to be a bare knuckle fight where it was just who has the ball and it's a low scoring game, or the Eagles blow them out.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I believe the same thing in the Super Bowl.
If the Eagles can hold the ball by running the ball and keep the ball away from Mahomes, that kind of takes that style of game out. So do we think the Eagles are going to go into the biggest game of the year and just run the ball down your throats? Why not? I mean,
all right. So then that lends me to a question.
Good.
McMullen, do you know where I'm going?
I don't. Hypothetical.
You should. Oh. If all 3 of us agree that it might be advantageous for the Eagles to play in front rather than behind, because if you're playing from behind, it means more scoring.
Oh, you want the ball.
The flip of the coin at the beginning of the game. If you're Nick Sirianni, you go, you know what? we're coming out to establish the run. We know we can run it. San Francisco's a better defense than Kansas City. Not even the same conversation. And we ran it. We effing gutted them last week. Why can't we do the same again? Give me the football.
Well,
chances Nick Sirianni goes there.
I don't think Kansas City has won the toss once this year. I think I read that the other day. I don't think they've won the coin toss one time all
That's
year.
Impossible. That's impossible.
I'm pretty sure either it's a very, very, very low. They might have won it once or twice, but I don't think they've won the toss.
Yeah, the Eagles won 14. I think they were 14-3 as well, winning coin tosses, but they've lost them both in the postseason, and they've taken the ball and scored twice. Yeah. So, Jody, I asked Nick Sirianni your question.
Yes.
That was the question when Taylor Sirianni became a star. I asked him about taking the football first, and we had a nice little back and forth. And Nick said, I knew I'm going to be asked about this for 2 weeks. And I said, well, I know what you're doing. You're deferring. But I asked him if is it sometimes better to lose the coin toss because you have to take the football, and they've been able to create this tempo and get on the lead. And Shane Steichen, by the way, said, man, it's nice to get the football and set the tone. But they're not taking it if they win the toss, period. End of sentence. They're not taking it.
Yeah. I doubt they would say, we're going to take the ball. Everybody has followed suit. Who started this trend?
Bill Belichick, really.
Right?
Sandwich the second and third quarters with wins and with scores. And if you do that, you're going to win the game. I mean, statistically, it's way up there. So if you're able to play it right, some people call it the fifth quarter, the end, the 2 minutes at the end of the half, and the first drive in the second half. If you handle that right, you're in good shape to win a football game.
No, and keep this in mind, guys. Just a little. I mentioned this on my show yesterday. Andy Reid, Philadelphia. He knows this. He likes to pander a little bit. Andy. He's a closed door pander, right? Behind the doors, we've heard about how much of a personality he has.
Yeah.
Isaiah Pacheco is their running back. He went to Vineland High School.
Yeah.
Vineland High School, right here, about 40 minutes from me. Does Andy want to let him put on a show? You know,
might be their Boston Scott
because they don't run the ball a lick. This team, they don't even try half the time. But this Pacheco is a violent runner, man. If you watch, he reminds me of like Roger Craig for the young guys out there. Go watch Roger Craig. The guy's knees are up at his chin all the time. He just never stops. Does Andy do something like you mentioned, Jody? Have a John Gannon outer body experience and say, you know what? Those Philly jerks asked me to run the ball for years. You know what I'm going to do? Yeah, I'll run the ball against them to win this game with the local kid. I'll get the local kid to run the ball against those Philly guys who asked me to run for 14 years.
I like that thought, Mike. I hadn't thought of that. I like that because Andy did get killed for not running it here.
I was talking, Joe Valerio was on with me yesterday, who does the Believe in the Chiefs podcast. He's a local guy too. He went to Penn. He's in the area. And we were talking about this beforehand. He was saying, you know, Pacheco, he's a really tough runner. And I said, you know, Andy got asked to run the ball for 14 years when he was there, and he never did. How great would it be if he decided, maybe I'll run the ball against this team? So,
and by the way, can I just throw in somebody like Isaiah Pacheco is the reason why I don't think Miles Sanders is going to be back here next year.
Yeah.
That type of player.
Or forget it. You got Kenny Gainwell in your own roster. Are they already starting to make that phase?
Yeah. And the Eagles have gotten the sort of juice from Kenny Gainwell. They're going to think you can get a running back in the sixth round. Pacheco, I think, was a seventh round pick. And you know, you can roll it over and not pay him.
He played, by the way, Pacheco played quarterback at Vineland. So watch a little trick play as well.
Oh, there we go.
Good luck to both of you guys for what you're wishing. I'll say there's a
not wishing. I'm just saying to watch.
I'll say there's a better chance that Nick Sirianni says, "Give us the football on the coin toss," than Andy Reid hands it to Isaiah Pacheco 20 times. Better chance Eagles take the ball than Andy goes, "Yeah, we'll run it down the Eagles' throat." That's just not happening. Not what. And if it does, If they lose the game, Andy should be fired. If you got Patrick
Well,
Mahomes,
2020.
I'm going to ride Isaiah Pacheco, my 7th-round draft pick, to a Super Bowl win and not use Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, the Hall of Fame coach should be fired.
He has touched it a lot this year, Jody Pacheco. And
he's got like 950 combined yards, and he didn't play all that much early.
No, he didn't play early in the season, and he's got 170 carries. So they have amped up. And by the way, they use Jerick McKinnon in the passing game a lot because of the receivers. Good pass receiver.
I know Andy likes to try and tell us that short passes are just like runs, but they're not. Passes are passes.
They drafted Edwards-Helaire in the first round, a running back, not because they thought he was this great running back, because they wanted to dump it off to him and let him, for an extension of the run game. But Pacheco doesn't catch the ball as much out of the backfield. That's an area where
they got that clear demarcation between Pacheco and McKinnon. But he's carried it 22 times in the playoffs, so 11 times per game. Yeah, that's a long way to go to get to 20.
Yeah.
Not happening anytime soon. All right, Mike, go have lunch with Dad. Appreciate you jumping in with us. Now, you're going to tell us ahead of time so everybody can go by and buy you a drink for lunch. Where you going?
No, you don't want to tell.
Do I want to? This place is packed enough when we go in there. But yeah. So
look at the ego on Mike Gill. You think everybody's going to come to see you at Mike Gill's show? ESPN South Jersey. By the way, tell us about your Eagles podcast. This is a new one.
Yeah, I took over the Believe in Eagles pod. Once the team, the season was over, they reached out and asked me if I wanted to take it over. Believe in Eagles. We do 2 to 3 shows a week. YouTube, podcasts. You can get it wherever the podcasts are. We have really good stuff on there. And having, just focusing on the Eagles. I do 4 hours where most of the show is Eagles, obviously, but this is like about 20 to 25 minutes that we're doing there. So they got me working, man. People keep reaching out. I got more time for more jobs if anybody wants me.
Except Friday for lunch. He's got to go see his
Friday,
dad.
12:20,
other than that, he's available. His name's Mike Gill. Thank you much for jumping in with us today, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, boys. See ya.
Mike Gill here with us on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac coming back. Hour to go. Dave Zingaro, NBC Sports Philly, is going to be part of hour number 2. A couple other people chiming in on the Eagles / the Super Bowl that I want to get a reaction from Johnny Mac. Come back, do that next here on Birds